I'd like to offer a special tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on this MLK Day that we as a nation celebrate. Many people don't realize this, but Martin Luther King and the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh were friends. They met each other on a few occasions before his assassination. And they had a very rich dialogue that went back and forth, including letters. And one of the letters, I believe it was one of the letters, maybe in conversation as well, I don't know. But um, Thich Nhat Hanh referred to Martin Luther King as a Bodhisattva, and that the Vietnamese people see his work in the United States as Bodhisattva work. Now, keep in mind that Martin Luther King nominated Thich Nhat Hanh for the Nobel Peace Prize, and that after his conversations with Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King Jr. began to come out against the Vietnam War. So, a question I'd like to think about is, what does it mean to be a bodhisattva? If Thich Nhat Hanh refers to Martin Luther King as a bodhisattva, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a bodhisattva? Well, the first vow of the bodhisattva: beings are numberless. I vow to free them. I vow to free them. Right? And so we know that um, people of color, well before the prominence and even the life of Martin Luther King, were enslaved. And then this enslavement was shifted to Jim Crow laws. And today we can say that it still persists in the form of the what Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow. In other words, the uh, great proportion of African American men in prisons, in the prison system, within the prison system. And so we have this persistence in our society that stems back to our very inception of enslavement of people of color, and it morphed into Jim Crow laws, and present day morphing into uh, into a disproportionate number of African Americans in the prison population. That's one small way in which this kind of oppression of African American people in our society presents itself. So, what is the Bodhisattva? The vow to liberate those that are suffering. And it's very much in alignment with the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. Take a look at that, chapter 25, where it talks about what Jesus wants his disciples to practice, not necessarily to believe in, but to practice healing the sick, clothing the naked, visiting the prisoner, feeding the hungry, right? These are the practices of a bodhisattva. This is what a bodhisattva does. Housing the homeless, taking care of the immigrant families. These are the activities of a bodhisattva. And the way that these bodhisattva activities manifest for our zazen practice, our meditation practice, is that the more that we can center our lives around taking care of the poor and oppressed, that's the terminology used in the Christian circles, the poor and the oppressed. The more we can circle our lives around the poor and oppressed, the more our zazen will deepen. For example, when I first started to go into prison with my teacher, my zazen was very different compared to sitting at the temple, or say compared to sitting in a room with the door closed all by myself. If we can connect with those that are suffering, our zazen will deepen, no doubt. And so Thich Nhat Hanh refers to Martin Luther King as a bodhisattva because that's the kind of activity he did. Right? He was one with the poor and the oppressed. And as a Buddhist practitioner, we're called to no less than that, right? To whatever degree we can, even to orient ourselves, to think about connecting with those that are suffering. That's our practice. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. So it's the first vow of the Bodhisattva. Thank you. And happy Martin Luther King Day.